We ask Allah Ta'ala to bless this gathering and to allow us to benefit from what we learned today. Take a moment to renew your intention. Inshallah, every moment that we spend studying the book of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is a moment that we will be extremely grateful for on the Day of Judgment. I ask Allah Ta'ala to allow us to learn that which will benefit us and to benefit us through that which we learn and to grant us beneficial knowledge. Ameen Ya Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah Ta'ala I begin. All praise and thanks belong to Him, and may His peace and blessings be upon His final messenger Muhammad and all those who follow in His footsteps. Very quickly, what was last week's principle? I want to make sure this is a class, right? So I want to make sure people are writing things down. It was 2 words. In Arabic, it was 2 words. Okay, yes, say it. The end result is for the believers. So that's in English, it's not 2 words. In Arabic, it's وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, right? Or الْعَاقِبَةُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Both show up in the Quran. Both show up in the Quran, and we said it's one of the themes of Islam, of our entire existence. And we said 3 different ways that it manifests, right? One of them is the core way, which is meant to be understood, and the others are meant to be understood as well, but it can never detract from the core way, which is that the end result is in the next life. Nobody is guaranteed in this life the victory in terms of dunya. However, the victory itself is guaranteed, but you as an individual Muslim, maybe you don't live to see it. But we said even then you still get barakah and blessing, and you might actually have more reward than those who live to see it. So it's a win-win-win-win-win for the believer, but you don't get to guarantee, like, and we actually had this discussion yesterday, I think, with some of the brothers about, well, if I make dua for Allah to make me wealthy, and then I just don't get wealthy by the time I die, like my dua wasn't accepted. I made it during Ramadan, I made this and that. So the idea is, if it were that simple, then every believer would be multi-billionaire. That's not how Allah promised you whatsoever. Then the prophets would have been multi-billionaires themselves, or would have been the richest of all people. Salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in. But that was never the understanding of faith. I guarantee you the prophets, despite living lives that were not as wealthy as their enemies, and that's always the case, almost always, with very few exceptions like Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, I guarantee you, and you know this very well, their lives were much more full and much more tayyib, which we'll talk about today, much more pleasant, much more fulfilling, much more beneficial to themselves and to others. And then of course their end result is they will get those riches and they will get that eternal bliss, and their enemy will not. So today's principle, the 16th principle of the book, by the way, for those who are coming for the first time, the book is called 50 قاعدة من القرآن, 50 principles, select principles from the Quran. I forgot to mention last week, because we said it before this class started in the previous sessions. The Sheikh did not say these are the only 50 principles that the Quran has to offer. He said these are 50 that I have selected for life. He said this is for the nafs, right? For you to go about life. How can you speak to your soul when you're going through life? He said, I've extracted these 50. I feel like you should remind your soul about these over and over on a regular basis, and it will help you set your life straight. So just so we understand, that's the goal when he collected these 50. There's hundreds of principles you can extract from the Quran, depending on your goal. If your goal is how to raise children, and you look through the 604 pages of the Quran, you're going to come up with 50 different principles that you extract. Right? If your goal is emotional intelligence, like Sheikh Mikhail Smith, when he made that book, The Prophet ﷺ's Emotional Intelligence, his goal was extracting experiences that relate to that topic. Same thing here, right? So in every time, depending on your goal, you're going to go through the Quran and find immense blessings and immense benefit for the goal that you're seeking, right? If you're looking, remember we talked about last week on Saturday, femininity or masculinity in Islam. What does it mean? And you go through the Quran looking through that, you're going to come up with 50 different concepts that you're going to have a lot of overlap, of course, because the themes of good versus evil and themes overlap, but you're going to come up with more specific examples, right? So anyhow, this is the 16th principle in the concept that the Imam Hafidhahullah prepared, in which 50 principles for life and to speak to your soul with. So he said, the 16th principle, قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ. Very straightforward. He didn't even include the whole ayah. He said, قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ. Say, not equal are evil and good. Not equal are evil and good. So how many of you guys needed a principle to know this? That good and evil are not equal? Did you not know that? That good and evil are not equal? I mean, any human, right? The very basic fitrah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is encoding it into the Quran. This way, yeah. Allah is encoding into the Quran. However, it's your fitrah tells you that our faith is a very basic, speaks to the basic core of our soul, which is actually our sub-principle number 1. I don't know if I want to call them sub-principles or just fawaid, points of benefit. Point of benefit number 1, less is more. Less is more. Sometimes we trick ourselves, we lie to ourselves that the more complex I make something, then it's more profound. Have you ever felt that? It's like, well, I just feel like it's if it's bigger words or if it's just so much more complicated, then it must mean it's a big deal. It must mean it's important. And maybe this will help my life here. But it's usually the exact opposite. Simplicity is profound. Wisdom is usually very simple and very straightforward. Don't complicate things, especially unnecessarily. So Allah repeats this over and over in the Quran, where Allah jolts us back to the basic principles. قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ. Say, and don't forget, this ayah begins with say, قُل. It offers an emphasis. The whole Quran is قُل, right? Did you realize that some ayat begin with قُل هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ قُل لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ. Say that there is no God but Allah, right? Or that there's only one God. So wait, why do some ayats begin with قُل? It's only a handful, even though the whole Quran is قُل. Say the whole Quran, right? Well, that's a different principle we have to talk about another time. But one of the functions of saying قُل at the beginning of an ayah is added emphasis. Like, hey, listen up. You know, this whole lecture I'm saying, listen up. I want you to listen to the whole thing. But at some point I might sit and say, listen up, guys. Then I'm basically doubling down, like, hey, for the next moment or so, please, I want your full attention. I want you to double up your attention, right? I'm about to say something extra important. I'm about to say something that applies universally on a stronger level. So Allah says, قُل لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ. We'll come back to the قُل in a second. All right. So none of us needed this to be a principle for us to know that it's true. So why do you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it in the Quran, and why do you think the Sheikh chose it as a principle? What's something that comes to mind? Well, let me continue the ayah, and then maybe it'll start to make more sense. قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكَ كَثْرَةُ الْخَبِيثِ. Say, not equal are evil and good, even though the abundance of evil might impress you. And by the way, khabith here is not the only word for evil. Khabith means something foul, something corrupt. What do you say when you enter the bathroom? What's dua? Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubthi wal-khaba'ith. It's close to the word khabith, right? Khubth, khaba'ith, khabith, same word. We talked about last week. The origin or the root word is khubth. It's Arabic, in the Arabic language, most root words go back to a 3-letter root. Khubth, foul, evil, corrupt, nasty, disgusting. So Allah is saying good, at-tayyib, Allah used the word tayyib also. Tayyib means not just good, yes, pure. Pure, something pure. So pure and foul are not equal, even if the abundance of something foul might impress you. This helps you now. Can you help me understand this ayah? When would something abundant, foul impress you? Okay, so he was surrounded, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was the exception. He was the pure person trying to be pure, surrounded by people who were not. They were being corrupt and foul. So, but why, in that case, why would it impress you? وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكَ كَثْرَةُ الْخَبِيثِ. At what point are you impressed by a lot of foulness? Thank you very much. On the face level, on dunya surface, Allah says, يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. Those people, Allah is rebuking these kind of people. He's scolding them. Those who know they only understand ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيا. They only understand the surface level of this dunya. But as for the afterlife, they're ignorant. Ghafil doesn't just mean ignorant. It means they're ignorant and they're not bothering to look. They're not investigating any further. So, Jazakumullah khair, sister. The khabith, the foul versus the pure, both of them can fulfill worldly desires. If you earn $1, whether it was through halal or haram, it can still go and purchase items, correct? But which of the two is going to have barakah and blessing? The pure, of course. Now, is that felt immediately? Not always. Sometimes it does, right? Sometimes it's felt really quickly or immediately, and it's a gift from Allah, by the way. The biggest gift you can receive from Allah is when your mistake catches up to you real quick. Why is that? So you get your expiation for it, kafara for it relatively quick. And so if you do so, you're not held to it in the afterlife. So you wake up quick. Jazakallah khairan. If you put your hand on the fire and it burns you immediately, you withdraw your hand real quick. If it were that you put your hand in the fire and you're going to feel this pain in 20 minutes, and that's a law of physics, imagine, for example, but you don't feel it immediately, what are you going to do? You may keep your hand there in the fire and get burned heavier and heavier and heavier, and then feel it later and then really be sad. Why did I let myself get this far? Because I didn't feel the consequences quick. So it's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He allows you to taste the lesser punishment before the greater one. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ, right? وَلَنُذِيقَنَّهُمْ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ الْأَدْنَى دُونَ الْعَذَابِ الْأَكْبَرِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. All right. So what other reasons could the abundance of khabith, of filth, impress you? Yes. Great. So it's easier. I think the first part, what you're saying, there's two things you're saying. The first part is that it's always easier to destroy than to build. True or false? Always. It's a lot easier to pollute a lake than to clean it up or to plant. It's a lot easier to cut down 100 trees than to plant 100 trees and wait the 100 years for them to grow. And it's across the board. It's a lot easier to corrupt a society. It's a lot easier to spread a lie and corrupt people's souls. It's a lot easier always to do evil than it is to do good. Good is an uphill climb. But those who do the climb, they benefit not only themselves, but they benefit society, they benefit others. It's worth it, basically. But it's always going to be more work. And that's part of the test of this dunya. As the Prophet ﷺ said that paradise is surrounded by difficulties. It's difficult to climb up there. It's high up. You have to climb. And hellfire is surrounded by desires, right? So if a person falls down that slippery slope of desires, they end up in the hellfire. May Allah protect us. Without any fail-safes, without any controls, and so on. Any other thoughts? Why? وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكَ كَثْرَةُ الْخَبِيثِ. When would the abundance of filth impress people? Thank you. More attention, right? The richest people on the planet are usually the foulest people. And they didn't earn their money in halal ways. It was, in fact, corrupt ways. And then they get to have fame, they get to have prestige, they get to have bodyguards surrounding them. When they walk, they get to have camera crews, everybody listening to what they have to say. But that's a very temporary thing. Fir'aun was the most feared man in the land, and everyone wanted to be around him and to get a chance to be around him. And then when it all came crashing down, on the Day of Judgment, they will pretend that they didn't know each other, right? So there's a million reasons why. In other words, why a person might get shaken up. We didn't need Allah already instilled in every human being's fitrah that قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ, that evil or corruption and purity are not equal. Pure earnings and evil earnings are not equal. We all know that. Everybody knows it's instilled in your fitrah. There's no human on earth who can say, I didn't know it was bad to steal. Or it's not going to be an excuse on the Day of Judgment. I didn't know it was bad to murder people and take their land. Oh, sorry, I didn't know it was a bad thing to do. I didn't read the Quran, or it never reached me. That's not excused. And that's why the scholars mention those who do not receive a book. There are people called Ahl al-Fatra. I don't want to get too much into it, but there are periods of time and regions of the world where it may be a valid excuse on the Day of Judgment if they pass away and they meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, oh Allah, I didn't know. I didn't know that I was supposed to wear hijab. I didn't know that I was supposed to do this or pray 5 times or this or that, the other. It may be accepted from these very, very remote experiences and remote regions and remote eras. But it will not be accepted from them if they murdered, if they tortured other people, if they stole. Oh God, I didn't know it was bad to steal. You sure? You didn't know it was bad to steal? If it happened to you, would you be happy? No. It's that simple. That's the most basic. You're not excused on that level. Even if you had no book, you're living on a desert island. You will be excused if you live on a desert island from not knowing the wudu and 5 daily prayers and tahara and stuff like that. Yes, you would be excused, right? That's a whole conversation about Ahl al-Fatra. Anyhow, so yes, why this deserves a place as a principle. Keep in mind, he said these are principles for your nafs, for your soul, that you remind yourself often. Why this deserves a place on our list is because me and you, throughout our life, we will be tempted often to go the easy route, like you said, and just take the khabith, take the filthy route, earn that haram income. Pursue that person for marriage, even though they're definitely foul, they don't fit your criteria. Pursue that fame, even though it's not the correct way. Be with those people, surround yourself with those people, even though they're foul and it's corrupt, but it's just easier. They're making jokes, they're backbiting people, they smoke, they drink, they do this. Yeah, but they're a lot of fun. It's easier. It's a slippery slope. It's a lot easier to slide down than to climb up, right? It's a lot easier to slide than to climb. Climbing is work, but climbing is how you rise. So Allah is showing us, is reminding us, or the Sheikh also afterwards extracted this from the Quran and said, hey, write this down as a principle because you're going to be tempted often. And this takes us back to the secret of why, one of the wisdoms of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكَ كَثْرَةُ الْخَبِيثِ. Say, the foul and the pure are not equal, even if you're impressed by how abundant the foul can be. You can earn $10 million in a corrupt way in the same time that it would take you to earn 1 million halal, or even 500,000 halal. But Allah says, don't worry, they're not the same. They are not equal. It will take time to realize that, but it's for your own good. So Allah knows we'll be tempted often. So yes, the secret of why it begins with qul, or one of the wisdoms rather, because there's many wisdoms. One of the wisdoms why it begins with qul is you have to qul, say this. Say this often. Say it to who? Say that they're not equal, the pure and the impure. Who are you saying it to? Number one, yourself. You're going to repeat that to yourself. When you're tempted to take that job, and you say, no, there's a weapons manufacturer's job. It pays triple what I'm earning now, but I'm not going to contribute to that. I'll just stick with my lesser income now, and it's going to be much more barakah. You repeat to yourself, it's not equal. The good and the evil are not equal. I know that. Even if it looks, وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكَ كَثْرَةُ الْخَبِيثِ, I'm really impressed by this salary they're offering, but I'm not going to take it. So you first things first, you say it to yourself as a mantra, right? As a motto, as a principle. What's another, who else do you say it to? The people who are trying to tempt you. So the people of evil who are already nose deep in it and they don't care. This is how they live their life. Whether they're Muslim or not. Don't say just non-Muslims. A lot of Muslims are dabbling in evil and some of them are drowning in it. And they say, come on, man, what are you doing? What are you, a sheikh now? Right? That's what they tell you. Everybody's been through that. And you put on your hijab, you want to change your life. They say, come on, what are you going to do? Want to be one of those people now? They're trying to drag you down. They're trying to drown you with them. So the people who are trying to tempt you, whether they're Muslim or not, but who else? Okay, let me hear you from you guys. Who else are you talking to? Qul. Your family, the people you love, the people you care for. They're going to be tempted just like you. Allah says, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. The believers are those who command each other and remind each other towards truth, and they remind each other to be patient. Why did Allah specify patience? Because you need it. You need it on that journey, a lot of patience. You need to be reminded, hey, listen, it's all right. There's work to be done, but listen, take the lower income, it's fine. Listen, disconnect from those people, Allah will replace them with better. You'll have better friends. Trust me. It needs that reminder. So you tell the people who you care for, the fellow believers, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. One more person, one more category. You sort of touched on it, Bilal, but I'm still looking for. This one's very important. The enemies of Islam, when they gloat, they're going to gloat and say, come on, look at our numbers, look at our tanks. What did Fir'aun say? Many different ayat. He said, أَمْ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْ هَذَا الَّذِي هُوَ مَهِينٌ وَلَا يَكَادُ يُبِينٌ. And many others, he said, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. Fir'aun said, إِنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ لَشِرْذِمَةٌ قَلِيلُونَ. Over and over, he said, look at this small gang. شِرْذِمَةٌ قَلِيلُونَ, meaning, look at this tiny little gang running around, talking about Musa alayhi salam and his small group of believers. He said, these people, they're a bunch of terrorists. He really did say that. وَإِنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ قَادِرُونَ. He said, we need to change all the laws. We need to kill a lot of people because these small, tiny gang is causing trouble. So, side note, but classic tactic of tyrants. They have they do a paradox. They say it's a tiny group. They're not really that big a deal. We don't have to worry about them too much. Simultaneously, they're saying we have to change all the laws because of this tiny group right here. We have to all fear for them. We all fear them so much that we have to change everything and kill so many people. So at the same time, they want to pretend like you're always tiny, but they want to use you as an excuse to change everything and steal more power and cause more harm. Anyway, just a side note there. But when the people of evil gloat and they dance and they prod and they get arrogant in the land and they say, haha, look at that. You guys have small numbers. You guys can't manage to get the same numbers that we can. You remind them and say, don't worry. Evil and pure and impure are not equal, and you're going to see in the long run. And not only will you see in this dunya, like we said, the previous principle, guaranteed you will see in this dunya, whether it's in my lifetime, your lifetime, or right after, inshallah. But in the akhirah, where it really matters, you're going to really see. And then we're going to see who's laughing. فَالْيَوْمَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنَ الْكُفَّارِ يَضْحَكُونَ. Allah says, on that day, the believers will be laughing at those kuffar. And it's well deserved. I remember one youth asked me, and may Allah reward him, his heart comes from a good place. He said, I don't know, this ayah makes me a bit uneasy. This was years ago. He said, I don't know, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem dignified for the believers to laugh when those evil people receive their punishment. What are your thoughts? Do you agree or disagree? Jazakallah khair. I hope that the mics caught it. I don't know if they do, but that's perfect. Jazakallah khair. That's a perfect, exactly, all my thoughts exactly. When Allah says, فَالْيَوْمَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنَ الْكُفَّارِ يَضْحَكُونَ. Any sisters, any thoughts on that, or did that? So you heard him, by the way? Okay, any additional thoughts? So, yes, this was years ago when this brother asked me the question. When, as deluded as we are, and I like the word you used, deluded, even though you corrected it, we were deluded in thinking, well, it's peacetime, things are going great. They weren't for so many of our brothers and sisters. But we are living in privilege, so it feels, come on, why would I laugh at people if they go to hell? I feel sorry for them. And that is your stance. That's your standard stance. Allah says, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَرِهِمْ إِلَّمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. The Prophet ﷺ, Allah says, you are almost going to kill yourself with grief. This is our Prophet ﷺ, chasing after them. عَلَىٰ آثَرِهِمْ إِلَّمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. Asafan, like out of such sadness that they're not believing this message, you're going to kill yourself with grief. That's the beauty of the heart of our Prophet ﷺ, the mercy to mankind. So that's the standard default of a believer. You feel sad. You don't want anybody to go to hell. But you get deluded, especially in our era, you get deluded into thinking that, well, it's peacetime and things are great. So when it becomes front and center, let me ask you this. That ayah where Allah says, فَالْيَوْمَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنَ الْكُفَّارِ يَضْحَكُونَ. On that day, the believers will laugh from those disbelievers who committed these atrocities. These past 8 months, do you have a different approach to this ayah now? Yes or no? Does it heal your soul a little bit more than it ever did in your life? Even though this kind of atrocities were occurring a lot more hidden, now it's front and center. It's never been this visible, the atrocities of oppression and war. Not just war. War is war. But targeting women and children and gloating and dancing on their graves, literally, and stomping their food and preventing the trucks from going in to feed people and blocking anesthesia and blocking this. This is a new level of foul. And these ayat they speak to the soul of the believer. And the last part is what you mentioned, is that it's not every believer will laugh at every disbeliever on the Day of Judgment. That's some people, the Prophet ﷺ felt sad as he cried. His uncle Abu Talib and many others, not just family. He felt as sad as ever because they didn't make it to paradise. And you too, there's plenty of people that you would feel the same towards. However, this is not every believer will laugh at every disbeliever. It's this people who deserve it. It will be an additional punishment for them to see, why shouldn't the victim who we see these young children right now who were murdered by these evil people, why shouldn't he come on the Day of Judgment and stand in front of his murderer and laugh in his face? Why shouldn't he? He was disrespected, he was humiliated in this life. He was abandoned by people who should be his brothers and sisters. Nobody came to their help, even though they should have and they could have and they had the ability to. Why shouldn't he stand in front of them and laugh and say, well, you were so arrogant, you disrespected my whole family, look at you now. Isn't that justice? That's pure justice. So that brother that asked me, I honestly don't remember. It was in this community. I just don't remember who it was. It was many years ago. I hope that he has a fuller understanding of this ayah now. And subhanAllah, experience is the best teacher. Allah offers 604 pages of principles in the Quran, and some of them are just not going to resonate with you. It's that simple. They're not going to resonate with you until you either experience it or observe it yourself. And you have a whole lifetime, inshallah. So the thing a believer must do, though, is have faith first. You're held, that's your obligation. You're not excused on the Day of Judgment to say, oh Allah, I was waiting until I experienced all 604 pages until I believed in them. I believed in the ones I experienced first. So I'm at 30%. I believe in 30% of the Quran. And in 5 years, I'll believe in 40%. And if Allah gives me 100 years, I'll finally believe in all of it. No, you don't have that option. That's a kafir. أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. Allah says, do you believe in part of the book and reject part of it? No. If you reject any part of the book, you reject all of the book. You're only allowed to submit fully to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you say, oh Allah, just like you've shown me one by one that they just keep coming true and they keep resonating, I've submitted that they all are true from God, and I'm just waiting to let them all resonate. And I will, my position, if I die before that, which you will die before you see everything come to life, like how egotistical can you be to think like, Allah has to prove to me every single ayah? Who do you think you are? You're 1 out of 8 billion people, right? What's your contribution to the world that you deserve that special treatment? And even if you did contribute, you are nothing but a servant of God. قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ. Right? I am nothing but a servant and a slave and a human being just like the rest of you. So our submission to Allah is to pledge to God, oh Allah, I have submitted to the whole book. I have submitted to the whole book, and I pray that you teach me and you grow my iman, the same way that Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam said. What did he say? Allah said, أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ قَالَ بَلَى وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. Ibrahim alayhi salam said, Allah said, don't you already believe? He said, yes, of course, O Allah. Bala, meaning of course. I've submitted. وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. However, if you can please allow my heart to be satisfied, to fully understand and articulate it. So Allah granted him that. And through our lives, I've experienced it more times than I can count. Where an ayah that I've read many times, Surah Al-Kahf, or many of these ayat that you've read 100 times, and it's a beautiful ayah, but it didn't resonate deeply to my heart and my soul. However, these past 8 months have really, really brought them out to the forefront. And who knows what the next few years or life or experiences bring out. Everyone's different. And that's the unique value that you can bring to those around you. If something resonates with you, like this one, قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ. Evil and pure and impure are not equal. Maybe you have a story to tell. Maybe you rejected the job that pays 3 times as much because it was impure earnings, and then you stayed with a job that pays 3 times less, and then you have a whole story to tell about how that led you to so much better 5 years down the line, and you are now 10 times richer, or even if it's not in terms of numbers, it's just a more pure life. And my friend who took that job, even though he makes more money than me, he's miserable, and the family broke apart, and this and that and the other. And you say, this is my story. This ayah came true in my life. You have a story to tell. It resonates with you more than it resonates with the person who's 18 years old, didn't really experience life yet, right? And they just have to take it on faith. You can help them, tell them, hey, don't just take it on faith, take it from my experience too, right? That's what a sister said last week about the difference between reflecting on the Quran versus tafsir of the Quran. Do you remember that question? She said, is it allowed to sit in a circle and reflect on some ayat? Are we doing tafsir without ilm, without knowledge? The big difference, that's a perfect example of reflecting versus tafsir. Tafsir meaning, I'm going to tell you what this ayah is meant to mean. That you need to have some knowledge and some background. You have to understand, you have to have studied. How do you say وَمِنَ الْجَوَارِحِ مُكَلِّبِينَ? Allah says in Surah Al-Ma'idah. What does that mean? You say, I think I'll look up the translation and tell you what I think it should mean. No, that's tafsir. That's extracting rulings. But reflection, everybody should reflect personally. Sounds good? And that's the value add that you can have from your personal experiences and so on and so forth. Any questions or comments? Oh, somebody? Nobody? Okay. Yes. SubhanAllah. SubhanAllah, Jazakallah khair. Through their adversity and through the barakah of that land and those people and what they've gone through, they are wired differently. They taste the Quran on a 10 times deeper level than a person who has been living an easy life. It's that simple. And if you look through the stories of the prophets, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in, same exact thing. They all went through adversity. How arrogant can we be to think that, well, I shouldn't go through adversity. My biggest tests should be how much time I spend on the computer, on TikTok and this and that. And should I buy more luxury or should I not? That should be my biggest test. No way. If you actually live like that until you die, you haven't achieved much. Like, you're not gonna, Allahu alam, of course, but it doesn't seem like you'll be anywhere. If Allah even admits such a person into paradise, it just doesn't seem to make sense to me. Nobody gets to live a life like that. It's very rare. We are already living, if you've been living 20, 30 years in comforts, you're already 0.0001% of mankind, like top percentile. So we don't ask for difficulty. However, if it comes, we be patient. And we should not get so complacent in the easy life that we don't expect difficulty will come. And if it happened to our prophets, right, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in, they became refugees, they had to leave their dunya behind, they had to face adversity. And it happened after the age of 40, right, for most prophets. So don't say like it won't happen to you. Don't ask for it. Ask Allah for Allahumma adim alayna ni'ma wal afiya wal barakah. Say Ameen. I mean, may Allah Ta'ala keep us in barakah and ni'ma and afiyah and well-being. But if it does come, then you say, okay, هذا ما وعدنا الله ورسوله وصدق الله ورسوله. This is what Allah and His Messenger promised us, and they spoke true. And it happened to those who are better than me. So why should I complain? I had there's a famous poem. I think it was by a Sahabi, by a companion. But one of the lines I remember, he said he was talking about just facing difficulty, and he said he's talking to his nafs, his soul. He said, أو تبتلي فطالما عفيتي. I don't remember the rest of the lines, but he was saying possibilities of what should happen, of what could happen. They were going into jihad and defending the ummah. And he said the possibilities is you get injured, the possibilities is you get killed. And then he said, or you face a bala, you face a fitna, like maybe you're handicapped after the battle or this or that. But then he followed it up with, فَطَالَمَا عُفِيتِ. He said, he's talking again to his nafs, his soul. He said, so maybe you do get tested and you face difficulty in life, but you've been comfortable for a long time. So what? So what's the problem? Why would you be concerned? And what right do you have to complain of facing some difficulty after 30, 40, 50 years of comfort? Did you think it wasn't going to happen? So like this mindset was like, so accept it. You accepted the good for 30 years, so why not accept some difficulty too? So this kind of mindset was very powerful. All right, I wanna like wrap it up in about 10 minutes and give some more questions, inshallah, and like allow for questions. So we said that less is more. That's the most important thing. Don't ever fall for the trick that complicating things makes them more profound. It can happen, but usually it's the exact opposite. If you want something profound, you find it in more simplicity. You remove the excess, remove the fluff, remove the noise, and then you get the principle. Yes. So next we want to say here, the scholar mentioned, Hafidhahullah, he said that this ayah was mentioned in the context of different types of good, drinks and then game, aka like hunting, food, and so on. Food and drink and things that are prohibited and things that are not, and so on, right? And basically he's saying that if you pursue it in a halal way, the standard experience is that you may get less because you are following principles. You have some barriers that other people don't have. These barriers are principled barriers. You can't just pollute the ocean. You can't just overfish. You can't just this or that. But you'll probably get less. But don't be confused and don't let your eyes get distracted by those who earn more than you in a haram way, because ultimately the end result is for you, inshaAllah ta'ala. Okay, next up. So this is a great question. Allah mentioned khabith and Allah mentioned tayyib. We said what do they mean? Khabith means foul, corrupt, evil, filthy. Tayyib means pure good, right? And Allah says they're not equal. Even if you're so impressed by how much the people who earn in a foul way can gather. Okay, who decides what falls into the tayyib category and what falls into the khabith category? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course. It's a very straight question. Now, when it comes to earnings, some of them are very clear cut: stealing, cheating, contributing to harm of other people, right? It's very clear cut, predatory, like riba and so on. That's khabith. Others, it's so clear cut that's halal, helping others and so on and so forth. Then there's some umurun mushtabihat, right? The gray areas. The gray areas is usually when you need to now, with a more urgency, consult the Quran and the Sunnah, because it's not so clear cut. Is this job technically halal or haram? I can't really quite tell. Like these, I don't know, mortgages or this or that. Sure, it's riba, but it can become obscured where someone says, well, technically this is I'm only doing this part of it, and technically people get homes from it and stuff. So it like starts to say, people are like, I don't really know. I don't know what the answer is. So then I want to know, when you go and ask a sheikh if this job is halal or if this experience is halal or this or that, what you're really asking is not the sheikh's personal opinion. You're saying, your real question is, hey, tell me if this is tayyib in Allah's eyes. Right? That's the actual question you're asking. Because you don't care what the sheikh's opinion is. He might like it, he might not like it. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking you, I'm coming to you because I assume that you have some more knowledge than I do about this subject. And I would like for you to know, does Allah approve of it? Is it tayyib in Allah's eyes or not? Right? So the real important question in our era, who decides what is tayyib? So this is actually a philosophical question you have discussed before, where the concept of, relative morality, right? Or moral relativism, wherever direction it goes. It's like, is morality relative? Meaning, does good and bad fluctuate? What is considered pure, it changes from one era to another. 20 years ago here in America, gay was a curse, was an insult. Now, if you're not gay, it's an insult. Saying cis male or cisgender is an insult. It literally is. Yeah, isn't that insane? They're telling you you're normal. That's an insult. That's bizarre. It blows your mind. But that's what it is. So they've decided it's not pure anymore to be called cis or this or that, whatever. They've decided that something that they thought 20 years ago was not pure whatsoever. Like, no, it's not only pure, it's encouraged, it's this, it's that. Isn't that crazy? No, I'm not saying this just to joke and make a joke. It's like, it's insane. Other things like, what are other things that society has flipped around and said, well, it's pure now? And before they didn't feel that way. Yes. Adultery, right? Or is it now? We've passed in America, I don't remember what year, but you can look it up. We officially passed the 50% mark of children being born out of wedlock. It was hovering in the 40s for years and years, probably decades. Now it's more than half kids born in America are not born from a marriage. So this is like, hey, what are you living in? You're living in the past. Of course, this is normal. This is fine, etc., etc. What's another thing that they've? Yeah, marijuana, drugs, right? The decriminalization of drugs, and you notice how all these things become slippery slope. It always starts somewhere, where it's like, well, I mean, we're not gonna fight this, right? They just want a little bit in the direction. They're not gonna go further than this. 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the line, it's completely gone now. It's too far gone that you can't even reel it back in. Any other thoughts? Children, little kids get to choose their gender now. And if you don't, in some states, they've proposed bills where if the parents get in the way, they've proposed bills already that the government will be able to take away the kid. This is in Jersey and in California, at least that I know of, that they proposed this bill. Wal'iyadhu billah. Thoughts? Yes. Yeah, subhanAllah. And Allah, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ warned us that this will happen in our ummah. He said that parts of my ummah will legalize certain things and consider them to be fine. And he said, يُسَمُّونَهُ بِغَيْرِ اسْمِهِ. So he said, this is one of the loopholes they will use. يُسَمُّونَهُ بِغَيْرِ اسْمِهِ. They will rename it, give it other names in order to make it more palatable and applicable for people, so then they will end up doing it. So subhanAllah, no, you're right. The idea is that the reason why Allah, or not the reason, there's a million things to explore about it, but one of the wisdoms of why riba is haram in Islam, interest is haram, is because it devours society. And it puts the weak at a disadvantage and in a long-term scale. The individual might benefit temporarily, but on a large, long-term scale, it ruins entire society and it puts society up for collapse, which is exactly where we're at now. These bubbles will never be, there's no way to decrease the size of these bubbles except collapse. There's only one avenue for these bubbles, and that is to pop. The student loan bubble, the housing bubble, and we recently reached, last year, we reached a record of people defaulting on car payments in American history. I'm sure you know that from your field. So like, it's all, catastrophe that's being brushed under the rug, but may Allah Ta'ala protect us. Who knows how much longer it can be. So this is why it's a concept. Allah doesn't make something haram just to make life difficult. He makes something haram because it's khabith, it's filthy. Even if you are, وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكَ كَثْرَةُ الْخَبِيثِ. Even if you're impressed by just how much khabith they're able to collect, it's still filthy, and filth never prospers, right? قُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلِ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. Falsehood is ever bound to perish. It is destined to perish. Falsehood has an expiration date, and you don't want to be present when the expiration date hits, because it hurts everybody. What is it? اتقوا فتنة لا تصيبن الذين ظلموا منكم خاصة. Allah says in the Quran, fear a punishment or a test that will not just afflict those who committed dhulm. It hits everybody. May Allah protect us from that. Yes. Mm-hmm. It's a good question. So when it comes to khamr, I would definitely have to research that more, because I'm curious as to how much was permitted in previous scriptures, and how much they've played around with, for example, like how much was actually permitted versus how much, because khamr was initially in Islam permitted, and then it slowly, gradually was made haram in a step-by-step basis. So I'd have to postpone that. Now, as for the other specific types, for example, not eating types of food and that kind of thing, it's not in and of itself khabith for Bani Israel. Sometimes it was a form of punishment for them for the actions that they took. And then it was relieved when Prophet Isha alayhi came. Allah says in the Quran, وَلِأُحِلَّ لَكُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي حُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ. I've come to make halal some of what was made haram upon you specifically. So it was a temporary thing. And it was very clearly sent as a temporary thing, like أَرْبَعِينَ سَنَةً يَتِيهُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Allah punished them for 40 years. They're not allowed to have a nation. So they're remaining to wander in the desert. So some of these came down as specific punishments for a temporary period of time. If later people of our era, which they do, they've turned it into a universal thing, that's their mistake, right? So these things were, even as they came down, my point is, as they came down as haram, they were not presented by Allah as, this is khabith, stay away from it. It was, this is a punishment from you. It's good, but you're not allowed to do it because of your evil ways. So some haram comes in that format. Yeah, and now the other ones like khamr, is it universally, if Allah allowed it at some point, how can we say it is universally khabith? However, which is a great question. However, in the Quran, Allah mentions that فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. So Allah makes it very clear. Yes, there is some good in them, but some benefit rather. Allah says benefit. مَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. But their evil outweighs their good or their benefit. Therefore, it's haram. So that's also a principle. It might come up in the book, but that's a principle that every Muslim should know. It's one of the core principles of Islam, is that if there's good and evil in something and you cannot come to a decision, you weigh them. And if the evil outweighs the good, then we lean towards haram. And if the good outweighs the evil, we lean towards halal. So it's a very, very interesting discussion. I'd love to look into that, how much khamr was actually permitted in previous nations and so on and so forth. But I hope that, I hope everything we just said right now already gives the picture. Allah never said that there's no good at all in that. He just said that إِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِن نَفْعِهِمَا. Their evil outweighs their good. Any comments, sisters, or questions? Okay, so we'll wrap up now, inshallah. So, two things. The tayyib, who decides what's tayyib? It's Allah. And I say this why? Because I promise you, you're going to remember this, inshallah. If you live, as the Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِنَّهُ مَنْ يَعِشْ مِنْكُمْ فَسَيَرَى اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ مِنْ بَعْدِي. He said, whoever lives amongst you is going to see a lot of contradiction, a lot of disagreement, a lot of going back and forth. So he said, then stick to my sunnah and the sunnah of the righteous companions that led after me, right? The first generation, the 30 years after the Prophet ﷺ. So he said, hey, you're going to see a lot. You're going to see a lot of changes. Stay away from all those changes. And that's why he said, كُلُّ مُحْدَثَةٍ بِدْعَةٍ وَكُلُّ بِدْعَةٍ ضَلَالَةٍ وَكُلُّ ضَلَالَةٍ فِي النَّارِ. Every innovation, every new thing that you see in your faith, that people try to add to your faith, is an innovation. And every innovation is a bid'ah, and every bid'ah is in the hellfire. Every bid'ah is a misguidance, and every misguidance is in the hellfire. So be careful. In our coming times, the Prophet ﷺ already warned us that knowledge will fade and arrogance will increase. And people will be given platforms. And the worst type of people will be listened to the most. It's something we already observe, but we have to watch out for it within our own ummah. So people will be redefining what's tayyib. They'll tell you, what does hijab really mean? I mean, Allah just says modesty. The word hijab is not in the Quran in this context. And that's true. I saw that shubha goes around every now and then. Shayateen spread it online every now and then. Allah never used the word hijab for this, for women in the Quran. That's correct. Allah used other words, like khimar and so on, and modesty and so on. So they're just trying to find a loophole. Well, technically the word hijab is not used. Yeah, well, the word khimar is used, right? And Allah makes it very clear to cover your body, etc. But people will just find loopholes, as our brother mentioned earlier, and rename things. They'll say, well, technically, just like the Prophet ﷺ said, my ummah will make the same mistakes of the Christians and the Jews, every single mistake they made. So the Christians and the Jews, in their books, they have hijab. But they found different ways to deal with it, right? The Christians today's Christians will say, well, modesty is in the heart. You don't judge me. I could be wearing or doing whatever I want, and I could act in any type of way that's immodest, but who are you to judge me? God judge me. God knows I'm modest in my heart. That's the Christian method. The Jewish method is a little different. And I'll move on from here. Okay? So everybody finds a way to escape God's law, but the Muslims are the only ones still holding true, right? So be careful, because already parts of our ummah have fallen into those traps. They went the loophole route. They went the disambiguation route, or the ambiguation route. So there's two ways. You can delete the meaning and then say, well, who knows what the actual meaning is? So we're all technically following it, right? Prayer is in the heart, so don't tell me I have to pray 5 times. Don't tell me I have to make wudu. Wudu just means be pure, and I'm pure. So, and I do pray. What did DJ Khaled say, right? I pray 10 times a day. He just said whatever. You just say whatever you want to say. As long as you say, well, prayer is in the heart, and my heart is always connected to God. I'm praying right now, right? So you either make it ambiguous, so therefore you can't really decide or define who's doing it and who's not doing it, or you find a loophole and say, well, technically I am doing it, based on my technical definition. So these are both tafrit and ifrat, 2 avenues of ending into the hellfire. غَيْرَ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Those who have earned Allah's anger through loopholes, and those who are ضالين, they're misguided and they don't bother. Those are the guys who made everything so ambiguous that it doesn't really carry meaning anymore. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who decides what's tayyib. You will run into, as time progresses, I promise you this, people choosing one of those 2 avenues to redefine what Islam is and what ibadah is and what zakah is and hajj and everything that we do. Be very careful and don't fall for it. And the final thing I want to say is what the Sheikh said here. He said that Allah mentions khabith before he mentions tayyib. So, قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ. Say that filthy and good are not equal, or filthy and pure are not equal. So he said this is very interesting, because once you know what's filthy, sometimes it can be not so clear what's good, like you mentioned at your job, right? Sometimes you can't really tell, is this good, like objectively pure? But sometimes it becomes a lot more easy to say, well, I can't tell which avenue is great or good or the best avenue, but I know for sure that this avenue is terrible. I know for sure that this is evil. I know for sure that on the Day of Judgment, when the people who who blocked aid trucks from going to help starving people, and they were stomping on the food packages and throwing it in the garbage and lighting on fire, I know for 100% fact that these are foul, evil people, and this is evil action. True or false? On no planet of earth can stomping on aid that was meant for starving women and children who don't have anesthesia and don't have anything, on no planet can this ever be misunderstood or ambiguously a good deed. So I know for a fact I don't want to be anywhere near these people on the Day of Judgment. Wherever they are, I need to be on the opposite camp. So sometimes you can't quite tell where the tayyib is. But then the Sheikh said, well, figure out what's khabith and at least stay away from that. Isn't that interesting? Like, because sometimes it's a lot easier to know what's foul. Okay, at least maybe I don't know which job to take. Maybe I'll have no job. But I know for a fact that I can't take this one to join the weapons manufacturers to kill people. So I'd rather be broke. All right? Until I find out what's a good path, I'm fine. I'll be broke. I won't be in the evil path. It's a very, very profound thing that he mentioned. Sometimes that's the avenue you have to do. And sometimes it's much more clear to find the tayyib. Subhanallah. Okay. Perhaps I have to look it up. Allah Alam. But the concept of if you choose something that has a mix of good and evil, then you should err on the side of caution. And just say, you know what, I'll stay away because I'll assume that the evil, I'll assume that it's wrong for the sake of safety. So that's the concept of a Muslim. يتحرى الحلال ويجتنب الخبث والخبائث. So this is a very, very interesting discussion. He said that keep it simple. Always try to be on the side of good. Always climb. Climbing is more work, and you probably will gain less dunya-wise, but when you see the reversal on the Day of Judgment, you'll be so glad you made that decision, inshallah. Yes. Is it not true that 100%. Jazakallah khair. There's several hadiths or ayat and hadiths to that manner. Our brother said, is it true that the more you abstain from evil, the more Allah grants you basira? And there's a very famous hadith Qudsi in which the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah has said that whenever you use I'm paraphrasing the hadith, it's quite long. Whenever you use your faculties, meaning your eyes, your hands, your feet, and everything, your whole body for good, then slowly but surely your hands, your body starts to work in the service of God, and it becomes basically the understanding of the hadith is that your actions start to become all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The way when your legs move, they move for the sake of Allah. You're always going somewhere that's in service of God, whether it's the prayer, whether it's volunteering, whether it's your job, which is halal to earn for your family, this, that, or whatever it is that you're doing, and so on and so forth. There's another hadith of the sort of, it's also, both of these are in the 40 Nawawi hadiths, by the way. If you want to find them, Imam al-Nawawi, rahmahullah, compiled 42 hadiths. The book is referred to often as the 40 Nawawi. They just sort of like round it down to 40. Imam al-Nawawi said these 42, every Muslim must know them. So if you don't know them, this is like the core foundational hadiths. They have commentaries online. There's sheikhs explaining them online as well. You must do it. Every Muslim must study these 42 hadiths. So these two hadiths can be found in. The second one is one about is that من ترك شيئا لله عوضه الله خيرا. No, there's another one. I don't know if that's in the 40. Is it? Anyhow, but the one that I'm thinking about is إن الصدق يهدي إلى البر. That truthfulness or honesty leads towards bir or high taqwa. Like bir is like a person who has a high value or high iman, has been uplifted by God, has been like purified or holy. And sidq leads to that. And the opposite, sidq meaning honesty and integrity and trustworthiness and amana. If a person leads that kind of lifestyle, it naturally lends them towards becoming a more holy person. Even if they initially are not a Muslim, it leads them in that direction. And honestly, we've seen that in our era these past 6-8 months, where some people who, their honesty and their intellectual integrity did not let them lie for these shayateen, and they've become Muslim. Some such people that we've seen in our era. Yeah, subhanAllah. So it does tap you in to a higher spiritual connection. And it's something that every Muslim must do, inshallah. So the Nawawi hadiths, you'll find them with the commentary. Okay, yes. So you said they go to a specific sheikh to get a specific fatwa. Are they intending that sheikh for that fatwa because they know he's more lenient, or? So I'll tell you this. So remember we said if we can't know something, you go to its opposite and see if we can figure out there. So if I don't know what to do or I don't know what not to do, I can just tell you what you should be doing. What every believer should be doing. Allah says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. That's the command from God. If you don't know what the answer is, go to a person of knowledge. So your job is to go to somebody whose knowledge and their amana suffices you. So it's two conditions. Their knowledge, and number two is their trustworthiness. So if you go to somebody who's trustworthy in the community, very, very great brother or sister, you know, you trust them with your life, you can give them $1 million and they'll return it to you untouched. Their trustworthiness is there, but do they have the ilm? Can you verify that they have Islamic knowledge? If the answer is no, then they're only meeting one of the two conditions, and vice versa. If somebody has studied ilm for 20 years, but astaghfirullah azim, their actions are not the actions of the people of knowledge, then that's it, they're not to be trusted. Your job is to, which is referred to in the sciences of hadith, al-dabtu wal-adala. Al-dabtu wal-adala. So dabt meaning aptitude, their ability. So their ability is there, check. The second thing is their adala, which is their trustworthiness. In which case you can go and consult them. So in Islamic studies or an Islamic question, you ask a sheikh whose actions, from what you've interacted with him and from the community, his reputation in the community, it's all trustworthiness is great. And then you know that this person sought knowledge in a formal way for a long period of time. That's it. You've fulfilled your condition as an individual, as a layman, as a person who doesn't have Islamic knowledge to a high level. You go and ask them for a fatwa. You're not held to account for if they were wrong. Because, of course, in gray areas, there's several fatwas because it's a gray area. Like our brother mentioned, he follows a fatwa where they said the first home you own here in America, if you get a regular mortgage, it can be allowed under certain circumstances. You notice I said it a lot different than you said it. Oh, it's allowed. No. It can be allowed under certain circumstances here in America, in certain states, with conditions, if they can't afford it. There's a lot of conditions. But a lot of people will say, I heard it's okay. And they have 10 Airbnbs that they rent out another week. Not allowed, right? So, but it's not to call you out. I'm just saying this is very important. Your duty between you and Allah is to say, I went to somebody whose knowledge and integrity that I trusted. And they gave me a fatwa. But now the second thing you said is that, what if somebody doesn't like the fatwa and he's looking for specific ones till he shops around till he gets it? That's clearly haram. They're not fulfilling they're not submitting to anything. They're just going to keep going. They realize all gray area questions have several fatwas. So all I have to do is just keep asking until I get the one that I want. That's not okay. So we can talk about that a bit later because it's a whole concept. But the idea is you got to be submitting. So there's not that many people that you consider to be trustworthy and high knowledge. In a typical person's life, you don't have 10 sheikhs that you're in contact with. In the modern era, because you can go on the computer, you can contact, or you can at least see the fatwas of 10 or 20 or 30 of them. But you don't even know 90% of these people. You don't know anything about them. Some of these very, very popular speakers or preachers online, they have no credentials in Islamic studies. And they don't even hide it, really. I mean, anyway, they have their own story. But so my point being is that your job, you have some work to do. Your job is to do the best you can to ascertain. I'll ask you one last thing, is that principle applies everywhere, not just for Islamic studies. Al-dabtu wal-adala. When you go seek a medical advice, you have to make God forbid, you have a big procedure coming up. The stakes are high. You're gonna go find somebody whose medical knowledge you trust, but also their amana, they're trustworthy as well. If they have, he went to med school, but he got a 62, and he's terrible, he's got kicked out of it, he's lost his license, you're not gonna ask him for advice on your surgery, and vice versa. If he's the best, like he's just a very trustworthy person in the community, but he has no medical knowledge, you're not gonna ask him the stakes are too high. You should apply the same to your religion and to everything else. Cars, whatnot. You can look for someone who has expertise in cars, but is also trustworthy. So he doesn't rip you off, etc. Right? And you apply this across the board. Sisters, any questions or comments? Yes. So when it comes to jobs, I mean, I think this would be a more specific question that I can answer at a later date. But in general, these principles you apply, like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that there are clear-cut haram and then clear-cut halal. And those are the biggest circles, and they're very obvious. Cheating, stealing, lying, contributing to murder, contributing to theft, contributing to dhulm. These are pretty straightforward. Then there's some more gray areas where it's, well, technically my job is perfectly halal. The actions that I'm doing for this company is perfectly halal, but they are affiliated with a company that has a presence in the occupied territories, or that just built a hotel in the lands of the Uyghur Muslims. So it's like, wait, this is like 3 layers removed.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على محمد اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آتي محمد المسيح. Okay, I want to break inshallah for salah. But sister, yeah, the Prophet ﷺ in the 40 Nawawi hadiths, the ones I recommended, you will find this hadith and the commentary on it. There's a beautiful, it's about 220 pages. If you Google 40 Nawawi hadiths with commentary, it's going to be the first